Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So this is going to be a response to a video. I'm not even sure who the speaker was. It seems like just by the looks of it, those 30 seconds, it was some Christian apologist. Very strangely, as many of them are doing, trying to make a case for why Israel belongs to, the land of Israel belongs to the Israelites, or that they should support the state of Israel. This is a case in point of someone saying something confidently, but saying something that's so ridiculous that when you really break it down, you begin to think, like, what is this person even talking about? So let's look at what he said first of all. Now, so he's saying here that, thousands of years ago, there was no such thing as Palestinians. Therefore, the people today who are called Palestinians couldn't have owned the land.
That land never belonged to the Palestinians, because thousands of years ago there was no Palestinians.
So to just make you understand how silly that is, thousands of years ago there were no such people as the Zulus, as we are here in South Africa. The term didn't exist. They were called the Bantu people, or there was no such a thing as a Zulu ethnic group. So therefore that means the Zulus never owned the land. If you look at it like that, it doesn't make any sense. Yes, thousands of years ago, there was no maybe term for these people possibly called the Palestinians. But if you look at it tens of thousands of years ago, before any of this ever took place, there was no group of people called the Israelites. So does that mean the Israelites never owned the land? So what is he really trying to say? Right? So that's like, it's like, doesn't even make any sense. The fact that there was no word for this group of people 1,000 years ago doesn't, number one, mean that they never owned the land, and number two, it doesn't mean that even if they didn't own the land 1,000 years ago, they couldn't have owned it 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 400 years ago, 500 years ago. So the whole argument in and of itself makes no sense. You could apply the same thing to the Israelites and say the Israelites never ever owned the land because 10,000 years ago, 20,000 years ago, there was no such thing as the Israelites. And even the term British didn't exist 10,000 years ago, so the British never owned England. I mean, if you use that logic, then nothing really works. It doesn't make any sense.
Joshua occupied that land. Islam didn't even exist for like 2,000 years yet. David was a king there. Solomon built a temple there.
Now in this part he's saying, okay, so Joshua occupied the land. Look at the words he's using. Joshua occupied the land. Joshua was on the land. We want to really know, how did he get to the land? Was he always there? Who was there before him? So conveniently he leaves all of that out. When Joshua actually, before he entered the land, there were many other tribes living there. There were the Canaanites, there were the Philistines that were living there. There were many other tribes living there. Joshua didn't just occupy the land. They occupied the land well before the Israelites ever got to the land. So using this idea of, no, they were there first, or the Israelites were there before the Palestinians of today, it doesn't make any sense. And Joshua didn't just occupy the land. If you read Joshua chapter number 6 verse 21, it says that he took with the sword, the men killed women, children, animals. They massacred and genocided that entire area, right? And this is what it says in the book of Joshua. So he didn't just occupy the land, he didn't just find it empty. In fact, this is a common colonial tactic that we in South Africa are quite used to, where the colonizers, when they came, they said, no, we found the land empty, we didn't actually steal any of the land. And in the way that this person is using language, it's as though Joshua just came there and there was no one there. No, there were people living there before Joshua. So again, this is a very, very weird and a very disingenuous way of phrasing what he phrased, and God knows best what he's trying to accomplish by this.
That area was given by God. Not UN, not United States, not Donald Trump, not even Abraham. God came to Abraham and made him a promise. Few things he said. Number one, I'll make you father of many nations. Number two, he says your seed will bless the nations of the world. And number three, I'm going to give you real estate. And God made it very clear that land is his.
Now, this last and final thing that he says, God promised God gave the land to the Israelites. We really need to look at this because this is confusing a lot of people. So it's true, in the book of Genesis, God promises Abraham the land, and he says Abraham will become a nation or he will become a father of many nations. But we need to remember that when Abraham passed away, according to the Bible, he didn't own any land. So, do we understand that to be a false promise? How do we understand that? So, God promises Abraham this land. He promises the land again to Joshua after that. And these promises are there, but we need to understand these promises in their context. Is it a promise forever and ever and ever that's not restricted, that comes with no responsibilities, that's just. Think about it like this. Why would God just prefer a certain group of people and promise them a land and say you can kill other people, and there's no restrictions, there's no reason, there's no wisdom behind it? That doesn't make any sense. So when we speak about Israel being the chosen people of God, we need to understand it in a certain context. So read Exodus chapter number 19, verse number 5 to 9. God doesn't say you are just the chosen people. God says if you obey me fully, keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you will be my treasured possession. So it's not just you are favored, everyone else is not favored, if you obey me fully, if you keep my commandments. And when it comes to the land, we find the exact same thing. And there's many quotes. I'm just going to give one here in Leviticus chapter number 20, verse number 22. It says, you shall therefore keep all my statutes, all my rules, and do them, so that the land where I'm bringing you to live may not vomit you out. What does that mean? If you stop following the commandments of God, if the children of Israel stopped following the commandments of God, they have no right to the land anymore. Right? And as a Christian, you know that the children of Israel rejected the Messiah, Jesus, so therefore they stopped following the commandments of God, so therefore they no longer deserve to live in the land. They even attempted to get Jesus killed, according to the Muslims, attempted, so they no longer deserve to live in the land. The state of Israel today, 40% of Jews living there are not real Jews, they're atheists, they're secular Jews. They don't follow any of the commandments. They don't follow these commandments. Therefore, according to this, God hasn't given them the land. They need to be vomited, thrown out of the land. In Israel, Israel is known to be the gay capital of the Middle East, whereas one of the commandments is you cannot commit homosexual acts, yet it's freely allowed in Israel. So the land that God promised to a certain people definitely did not include the people we see today in the state of Israel, who are completely violating all of these commands of God, and so the promise of God does not apply to them in any way. And if you read Matthew chapter number 21, you'll see the parable where God says that the promise that was once given to them has now been moved to another nation. And who could that nation be? It could only be the nation which would fulfill God's original promise to Abraham, where he said that your progeny will own this land, and your progeny includes his eldest son Ishmael, and from Ishmael comes Ismail, comes the Arabs, and from the Arabs comes the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
And only 600 years after Jesus that Islam started to make its wave in the Middle East.
Now, one last and final point of this video, because this is a mistake that is so egregious, it's so blatant, one wonders how a public speaker could ever make such an error. He says that Islam only came about 600 years after Jesus, so therefore the Palestinians living there couldn't have been the original inhabitants. Right? Now this is based on the very silly assumption that the people who are living now in Palestine are the Arabs, which is completely not the case. When the original Arabs came from Medina, Mecca, and they came to Palestine, the Palestinians who were already living there for many centuries accepted Islam. It is not that the Arabs who were from Arabia came and inhabited Palestine, rather the original inhabitants accepted Islam. Therefore, even if you go to Egypt today, yes, the majority of people speak Arabic, but those are not actually Arabs. Those were the people who were always living there, who have now accepted Islam. Just because a nation has changed their religion, it doesn't take them out from being the original inhabitants of the land. So I think that was a very silly mistake. Anyone who understands anything, who can think critically, will see that that was a rather silly thing to say, if we can put it bluntly. Jazakallahu khairan. I hope this message reaches who it needs to reach.
الحميد المجيد الرشيد الشهيد اللطيف الخبير